Good afternoon. We welcome Secretary Butchabad and everyone else, Yusek Moya, Yusek Acusar, Ms. Jimenez, MBA, Mr. Faisan, Attorney Carlos, Engineer Melgar, Engineer Resio, Ms. Encarnacion to today's hearing, and ASEC Chua and Director Fajardo. Yes. Kasama kayo ang N-Dream Sea Fund, no?
Nasa N-Dream Sea Fund.
Oo, N-Dream Sea Fund. Oo, sige. Yeah. No one else is joining me? Right. May we have the presentation, Secretary Bud?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to the rest of our guests, my colleagues in DBM. I'd like to present, first of all, the mandate of the Department of Budget and Management is to promote the sound, efficient, and effective management and use of government resources. And for this purpose, we focus on three key areas: transparent, accountable, and participatory governance, poverty reduction and empowerment of the poor and vulnerable, rapid, inclusive, and sustained economic growth.
Sec Butch.
You want me
perhaps
to
we can
go
go
ahead
to
to
the
the
yes,
budget?
yes,
Okay.
because we know this and we have a hard copy.
Okay.
And yes, let's
Okay.
kindly go to the budget. Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, the DBM is proposing a modest budget. In fact, it's a budget that is much less than we sought for and got last year. This year, the total budget that we are proposing is 1.4 to 2.6 billion, which is about 33.4 million less than last year's 1.456, or about 229%. And in terms of disaggregation, about 36% of this budget is PS, or 511.7 million. And of course, 2.5 million is retirement. The overhead MOE is 54.8%, which includes a lot of our digitization or automation program expenses, and about 4 million in capital outlay. 2.7% is expended for the Government Procurement Policy Board, which has a technical secretariat that supports it. Well, in terms of disaggregation by classification, it is presented in the slides that general administration takes up about 66%, support to operations about 7.9%, operations itself about 24.3%, and for projects 5.1%. In terms of distribution by MFOs, major final outputs for budget policy advisory services, 23.8 million or 6.5% is allocated. For budget management services, a big chunk of 206.6 or 56%. For improving productivity, it's 28.4% or 7.8%, and then for performance review and evaluation, 87.5 million or 23.9%, Madam Chair. So that's it's a small budget, Madam Chair. So that's really why
You're correct in saying, Secretary Abad, that it's a small budget. So since we have hard copies of these, let's not discuss that. I would like to pose my questions so that we're straight to the point and we save time as well. Yes, I just wanted to be clarified on the budget priorities framework. I will no longer read into record the Secretary of Blank, etc. is authorized to allocate that definition after the budget priorities framework. Could I be enlightened? Explain to the committee, please, the intention or purpose of that provision, particularly on the grant of authority to allocate that amount in the wordings of the budget priorities framework. It says the Secretary of Blank and Department is authorized to allocate the amounts appropriated therein in blank in accordance with the budget priorities framework under national budget blank in order to sustain rapid growth and exclusive development. So my question is, the grant of authority to allocate the amount, how do you explain that in the nomenclature used in the budget priorities framework?
Me or the secretary?
Every agency, not you, sir. Every agency.
It's authorized to.
Yung allocation ng funds, sir.
That they follow the framework.
Yes, sir.
This is actually a special provision that is found in the departments. So we simply wanted to know whether it was justified to carry it out, to carry it over to the next budget, because this is carried in most departments, if not all, right?
It's for all
Yes,
department
yes,
heads.
yes.
And
What is it actually? I want to understand what it means.
well, especially after the budget is approved and the budget then enters the phase of execution, it's really a directive to all department heads to follow the budget priorities framework in the implementation. So the budget priorities framework sets forth where are the major investments that needed to be made, and therefore those major investments are reflected in the appropriations that they get, so that in the implementation they should stay within the budget priorities framework, Madam Chair.
Will this provision actually allow the secretary of a department to undo what Congress has done or allocated in the GAA?
No, whatever is provided in the GAA and in the respective departments, they should follow that, Madam Chair.
And this special provision does not mean that the secretary can undo or change what was, but the interpretation is not that it can change what was included in the GAA.
Certainly not,
No.
Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. Also, yesterday, in our hearing of the SUCs, the University of the Philippines requested that they be carved out of the SUC's budget so that there's clarity in terms of their budget and the other SUCs. I was wondering whether the DBM is actually, would actually recommend this kind of separating UP and the other SUCs.
In a way, we take UP being the premier state university differently from the rest of the SUCs, and you can see that by the amount of budget that they get. Of course, they want to be treated even more differently than the rest. And in terms of, for example, faculty development and research and development and the provision of capital outlay, well, we try as much as we can to accommodate the request within the limits of the budget. But at the same time, we always reminded the University of the Philippines that they also have their own sources of revenues.
I think what they meant was to simply, because right now the budget says SUCs, they wanted their budget separate from that, just in terms of how do you call it, presentation.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
we just call them as a group SUCs, but actually all of every SUC has a
Different budget,
separate, they have
correct,
separate budgets, and
They simply wanted it
well,
separate, yeah.
if they want it for presentation,
For presentation.
it's really
That's
not
fine.
it's really not
It's
a
actually
problem.
a
Yeah.
simple presentation issue.
Yeah.
And
Actually, one they may want to do is separate the budget of UPPGH, because, for example, there's talk that their budget was cut by 2 billion pesos. Actually, that was really 2 billion pesos of capital outlay that was given to UPPGH. And because it was a capital outlay, it's not a recurring expense. So now it would appear that after last year, they go back to, the capital outlay need not be allocated. It would appear that the UP system was deducted 2 billion plus pesos, but actually that's not the case. So
your suggestion is, apart from in terms of presentation, separating UP from the SUCs to also separate UPPGH from UP.
Yeah, because it's deceptive. Because part of their budget is really the budget of the UPPGH. Yeah.
That for clarity.
Yeah, so that they, because that really bulks up their budget, Madam Chair.
The special shares of local government units in the proceeds of the national tax. May I be enlightened? I'm not too familiar with this. What are the reasons for the substantial increase in the allocation of the special share of LGUs from 16P to 27?
The special shares,
35 in 2016. What is
they
this?
go to LGUs that hosts, for example, geothermal plants or mining tenements or other, for example, power plants. And usually in the laws or under our mining laws, for example, they are entitled to royalties that go to them. And usually it takes a while before the amount that goes to them is determined. We await, for example, the certification that comes from the Bureau of Internal Revenue that determines eventually how much they're supposed to share. So that's the ALGO assistance to local government units shares in national wealth.
So it is advanced? How is that? Because it takes time to be able to get it. This is the ALGO, this 35 billion?
What happens is it becomes a lump sum because normally the certification that determines how much is their actual or correct share comes during the period of budget execution. So what happens is we put in there as a lump sum, and then during the period of budget execution, the BIR issues a certification that this LGU gets this much from the royalties of that mining enterprise, and therefore that's the only time that we determine what the particular share of that LGU is during the period of budget execution.
So this 35 billion fund is a lump sum?
Yes, it's a lump sum, but it is broken down into shares in particular, let's say, mining or geothermal enterprises, and then the shares of the LGUs that host those are
It's all indicated under that lump sum?
Yes, yes.
It is the details of these. Is it simply a lump sum or there are details already identified into the LGUs? Meron na.
Well,
No.
I'll give you an example, Madam Chair. Kasama ba itong Dito ka lang. Kasama ba itong excise? Yeah.
That's fine. I've seen it. So it's
Yeah.
computation. It does not state the LGU, but
Yes.
it says it's based on what RA.
Yes, and then it determines from which particular source, like mining taxes or mineral reservation or forest charges or energy resources or prior. So there's a breakdown. It's not a lump sum.
Clear. The local government support fund, could you kindly explain that? There's also been an increase in the LGSF.
Yeah.
It's 18.4 billion.
And a breakdown. Yes.
Considering in 2015, it was only 3 billion, and now it's 18.4. And I believe the reason is the inclusion of the 11.7 billion of the bottoms-up budgeting projects, the BUB. May we know why the BUB projects were included under the local government support fund when it could be included in the BOB projects of the various agencies and departments?
Yes, it used to be, in fact, Governor Platt here because they are the proponents of Agusan. Some of our local government units are interested in this. The increase in the LGSF was brought about by, it used to be the case, Madam Chair, that the BUB funds were coursed through the national government agencies. But the problem with that is the national government agencies have to enter into a memorandum of agreement because since they hold the money, they remain accountable for those funds. And therefore, in the execution of the memorandum of agreement, they make it such that it's very strict, and the result is it takes a while to implement the project. So what we are trying to experiment in 2016 is to enable the direct release of the funds to the local government units so that they don't have to enter into a memorandum of agreement. And
so how is it done? The consultation is done, and then they present the output of the bottom-up budgeting process, and this local government support fund already includes the totality of the output and how much it would.
Well, this 11.7 billion represents part of the, I think the BUB budget in total is about 20 billion plus. But this represents a portion of the 20 billion plus that is going to be released directly to the LGUs. And this 11.7 billion, Madam Chair, already has a list of projects that accompany it, together with the location of those projects and where those projects are located. The basic difference is next year, local government units will be in a position to receive the funds and be accountable for the funds directly, Madam Chair.
May I just try to understand, when you say next year, how is it in this year? How is the downloading this year that it is not, as you say,
it's
directly
mostly
accountable?
coursed through national government agencies, Madam Chair.
Are there BUB projects still lodged in the national government agencies apart from that lodged under the local government support fund?
Yes, there will still be even next year about close to 9 billion pesos worth of projects. Because we also look at, Madam Chair, the capacity of the local government units to undertake and administer and report on the project. So if we are confident that certain municipalities and cities are able to manage these projects well and can report, then that's an incentive to release the funds directly to them. But if they're not, then in the meantime, they have to go through capacity building programs.
So I'm trying to understand the BUB. Part of it are lodged in the national government agencies, and this 11.7 billion is with the local government
It's
support
going to be
funds.
released directly to them.
And
Madam
directly
Chair.
to them. And
Yes.
you had divided the output of the consultation into what is the absorptive capacity or that of the LGUs, and this is the 11 billion.
Yes.
And the rest, the agencies will still execute a MOA with the LGU, or will
That's
the
correct.
agencies?
They will still execute the memorandum of
So it's
agreement.
still LGU implemented.
Yes, but it's coursed through the national government agencies.
Sir, there are some still national government and BUB pa rin. It's the national government implemented, not through the LGUs.
Of the 11 billion.
No, of the
Yeah.
regular.
Well, a good example would be the classroom projects and irrigation projects. The Department of Education still insists that we ought to hold the money for those, just to make sure that the location of the classrooms and the design of the classrooms are according to our specifications.
Classrooms are being implemented by the DPWH. Is that correct?
That's
Yes.
correct. Yeah.
The money is with DBM, goes to DepEd.
Yeah, and implemented by DPWH.
DPWH. So
But
the money,
selected by the LGUs as their BUB projects for
Yes.
next year.
and the funds are downloaded to
DPWH in that case.
directly,
Directly
not
to
to
them.
DepEd.
No, not to. There is a particular provision in the budget for new construction of classrooms where the funds, although attributed to DepEd, are released directly to DPWH. Yeah.
how would the funds of the 11.7 billion be accessed by the LGUs?
Well, from the treasury, the DBM will release the funds for the LGUs through our regional offices, and the regional offices will release directly to the accounts of the local government units.
Is the 11.7 billion already allocated? Because it's
yes,
naka-line item to.
there are attached.
Yes.
There are projects attached to those to that already.
This is not a lump sum.
No, it's not.
And this has line item of where it goes, which LGU, for which project, etc.
That's correct, Madam
Just
Chair.
like the balance of the 11.7 for the 20 billion lodged in the agencies, while it says it's BUB, naka-identify na rin yung proyekto in what province and what town, city.
Yeah, in fact, there is a BUB portal where you can actually access information with respect to the all those projects as proposed in the budget, Madam Chair.
Is the DILG not the implementer of the BUB?
No, but it administers this in cooperation with the
It does the
idea.
consultation, but the
Yes.
implementation is either DBM or the national government agencies.
Yes, well, DBM does not implement the project. It just facilitates the release. Yeah, the whole idea, Madam Chair, is really it's about devolution. But then we want to make sure that it's a meaningful one in the sense that you release funds to those LGUs that can manage them. But if there are agencies that cannot manage them but would need training, then we provide the training in the meanwhile.
There's also under the local government support fund a provision for upgrading of provincial roads. I
Yes.
just noticed in our budget there are so many agencies that does roads apart from DPWH. There's the DA, the DAR, the ano pa yung isa na hindi ko sabi ko but even DILG, and this under the local government support fund. I was just wondering, how do you delineate what is covered by DPWH, which is under MVUC, which is under you? This again will be downloaded to the LGU.
But this one, this is an experiment that we are undertaking to enable provincial governments to undertake the construction of provincial roads, because by the end of 2016, Madam Chair, we should be able to finish the construction, the rehabilitation and paving of all arterial and secondary roads and bridges. So we are looking at moving to improving provincial roads and roads that lead, for example, to tourism zones or farm-to-market roads that are major arterial roads for the farmers' produce. So that's where the government may be headed in terms of public investments in road infrastructure, Madam Chair.
How do we assure that there is no overlapping of the construction of roads? Because the DPWH constructs these roads, and they say that the priority are those leading to ports and seaports and to tourism zones as recommended by the Department of Tourism. Then we have, as I mentioned, other agencies also that recommend or that actually do the building of these roads. And then this local government support fund actually lodges the fund or gives the funds to the local governments to implement the, as you say, it's a test of local government's capacity to implement provincial roads. How do we make sure that there is no overlapping in provincial roads?
Well, one of the requirements that we made, and in fact this is going to be one of the things that we will be doing with this Calzada project with the provincial governments, is we will require all provinces and the DPWH to put together a road network plan for every province and for the region. And therefore, we will be able to track which part of the network plan is going to be undertaken by the DPWH if it decides to move into construction of local or provincial roads, and which are going to be undertaken by certain national government agencies like DA or DAR, and which will be undertaken by provincial governments. Part of the reason also for allocating it this way is to accelerate the construction, because there's also a problem sometimes with the capacity or absorption of some of the agencies. So we're looking at either devolving it to provincial governments, or, as in the case of public works, bidding them out to the private sector.
You mentioned about utilization of funds and the slow utilization of funds. First time I'm sitting as chair of finance, and I've seen how most, if not all, agencies are not really utilizing their funds to the fullest. There are those with very, very slow utilization, even just within mid-year, just 1/4 of its budget. What is the cause for all these? They claim that they lack personnel, plantilla positions are not available. Clearly, there are funds, resources are not fully utilized, and there are many reasons. Cases here and there. A secretary of the budget that allocates these resources, and you see that the resources you allocate to the agencies would have a clear mandate of implementing these, and the funds are not used. In all these years from 2011, have we not solved the problem of lack of personnel and all the reasons that they have actually given us for the slow utilization?
Well, we did not very deep, but a study of the reasons for the low level of utilization. And half of the reason for this are due to what you earlier mentioned. Generally, we call institutional weaknesses. Like, for example, preparing feasibility studies for the project, or in preparation for procurement, being able to come out with the technical specifications of the project, and being able to cost them realistically, so that when you go to procurement, you can bid out the projects, and you don't waste too much time shuttling the projects because they have not been defined very specifically for purposes of procurement. So that's really the half of the reasons why. And together with there are some agencies whose budget suddenly ballooned. For example, DPWH, when we started out, they had a budget of 165 billion. This year, that grew to about 570 billion pesos. So we have had to provide additional funds to DPWH to hire 1,300 plus more civil engineers. Or in the case of DSWD, when we started, they had 800,000 CCT beneficiary households with a budget of 10 billion. But this year, that has grown to more than 4 million households with a budget of 60 billion plus. So we have had to make more than 11,000 what we call municipal links converted into job order employees to contractual employees, so that they get the benefits, and they work with some degree of stability. So these are the adjustments. The other reason for the delay is procurement. And in many instances before, especially with big spending agencies, they had very few bid and awards committees. So we had to authorize them to add 2 or 3 more bids and awards committees, and have permanent bids and awards committees secretariat. So we realized that at some point we were growing faster than we could manage that growth, so we had to make these adjustments, Madam Chair.
Thank you for that. Let me just move first to the NDREAM fund. How much is lodged under the NDREAM fund? And have we already identified how it will be used? Under the NDREAM law, it should be utilized also for preparedness. What portion of it? Okay.
Well, the NDRIM fund is what we used to call the calamity fund, Madam
Yes.
Chair, but because of this new law,
Correct.
then it's been denominated as NDRIM fund. For
I have it here. The total budget is 38.8 billion. And I believe that a large part of it will go to Yolanda rehabilitation.
yes, we included a big portion of the NDRIM fund. The requirements for Yolanda rehab, 18 billion plus 25 billion, which has been allocated under the budget of the National Housing Authority. So the total Yolanda rehab fund goes up to 43 billion pesos to include the 18 billion that's under the NDRIM fund.
Do we actually have a list of all monies spent on Yolanda from 2014 to this year's budget? So by the time, if you don't have it now, before plenary, would you be able to give us all monies spent for Yolanda by all government agencies
That's-
vis-a-vis all donations received and where it was earmarked for?
Well, insofar as national government funds spent for Yolanda, we have spent almost, I think, 89.8 billion pesos already as of the end of, I think the more accurate, 88.961.
Across all, that is to date, across all government, whether it's road projects.
This is as of June 30, 2015, Madam Chair. And this includes all the way from 2012 for all the, relief, search, rescue,
so it's not just
rehab.
Yolanda, because
No,
Yolanda-
it's,
yeah.
this is all Yolanda. This is all Yolanda.
Yolanda happened in 2013, in November 8.
Yeah, but what happened there was the 2012 budget was not spent in 2012. It was carried over to 2013. So therefore, there was
So
money
you're
that's
saying
available.
89 billion is
Yes.
the total spent for Yolanda,
That's
which
correct.
was partly a carryover of a 2012 budget in the 2013 budget, but Yolanda happened last quarter of 2013, so that same budget was carried over to 2014.
Yes, they continue to carry over to the following year. That's why there was funds available, Madam Chair.
Could you kindly give or submit to the committee the breakdown of the 89 billion, 88 billion was it, allocated?
88.96.
Yes, 88.9 billion allocated for Yolanda, and which government agency implemented it, and the status of the completion of the projects.
Yes, we will provide the committee, Madam Chair.
Yes. So, still with the NDREAM fund, if a huge part of it, almost 19 billion of the 38 billion will go to Yolanda rehabilitation, so we have 20 billion left, what part of the 20 billion will actually go to preparedness? And what are the examples of preparedness or DRR, and what percentage of this 20 billion can actually be accessed by LGUs, or is it even NGAs for preparedness?
Well, the total, what we call the calamity fund proper, after deducting the 18.9 billion that's required for Yolanda reconstruction and rehabilitation program, and the 1 billion that's People's Survival Fund, the balance is 19 billion for calamity fund.
19 billion, what percentage of it is allowed to be used for preparedness, and how is it accessed? Is it through the Office of the President? Is it downloaded to the national government agencies or to the LGUs?
Well,
How does
this will be done by request of the agencies that required preparedness in certain, for example, geohazard areas. And what happens is it is the national disaster, the NDREAM board, the national board, that goes over it and recommends it to the Office of the President. And it's the Office of the President then that finally approves it and directs us to make the releases, Madam Chair.
What portion then of the 19 billion will actually go to preparedness?
There is no particular allocation of the 19 billion for preparedness or for, actual calamity, we leave that to the NDREAM board to decide, how they're going to proceed with the preparedness program and how much they will allocate for the actual calamities that may hit the country, Madam Chair.
Is it accurate to say that the quick response funds lodged in some agencies, national government agencies, when they not expire, when they're utilized, fully utilized, they can actually request from the NDREAM fund and use it as quick response? Is that accurate?
Well, the quick response fund of that's lodged in the national government agencies, and the total of that is 6.665 million for about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, for 8 agencies. 6.665 billion. That's for, for immediate response.
Correct.
And
But they told me that when they utilize the QRF and it's done, they can replenish it by accessing the NDREAM fund.
That's correct. They can do that, and they usually go through the same route, the
So-
board and then the president.
So if already more than one half of the NDREAM fund is used for Yolanda, which is post-calamity, and the QRF are used again for response, I'm back to my question is, I wonder what part of our NDREAM fund, which basically should be used for disaster risk reduction or preparedness, is actually utilized for that. Yes.
I think we leave that really to the discretion of the board as to how they figure out, the preparations for the year. Because I think this idea of utilizing part of the NDREAM fund for preparation is something new.
So,
Previously, it's all for actual calamities or post-calamity.
What I can see really is conceptually it sounds good, but when you look at the funds, because it looks good, NDREAM fund is 38.8, almost 39 billion. But of course, Yolanda areas must be served. Of course, the QRF must be replenished. And so when you look at it really, we are not really spending 38.8 billion for DRR as gleaned if you just look cursorily on the budget. We are actually still very response-oriented, which is not bad, which is part of the process, but we are not reducing the risks because we are not actually heavily allocating on risk reduction and preparedness. That's my opinion on what I see, how the NDREAM fund is used.
Well, in a way, the government is already moving in that direction. For example, in the design, we spent more money, we will be spending more money next year to strengthen the design, for example, of classrooms and health centers and municipal buildings. Because for next year, it used to be the case that the design could only take on winds of about 175 kilometers per hour, thereabouts. Well, next year, the design of classrooms, would assume winds of more than 250 kilometers per hour. So that means, we are now inducing resiliency in the design and construction of buildings. Or, for example, we are spending quite a sum, I think more than 39 billion for flood control projects. And the way DPWH is going to design this is to see how they can integrate water supply, irrigation, and in the design of flood control, so that the water just does not drain into the sea or the rivers, but they can
I
actually
think
be
you're
used.
referring to the water basins, the
18 water basins of the country.
flood, what do you got? The major river basins project. It sounded good again, but when I asked and pursued the question, Secretary Abad, with the DPWH, it would take decades to do that, because I was impressed with the presentation. And I asked them, what is your timeline of implementation? They are currently, they cited one project in Ilocos Norte, Pidig. And there was another one in Cavite. The other major river basins are still going to be studied, and plans are being made, and the timeline is actually 20 plus years. So it goes beyond. It's impressive when we say that, but it's not within our lifetime working. Yeah. And the amounts they gave was really way beyond the budgetary constraints. So. May I go now? So I asked for the cash received from foreign and local donors on one hand, and all monies allocated through NGAs for Yolanda on one. If you don't have it now, kindly submit it to the committee so that we will be prepared on plenary, because they will come and they will ask me that. How much total spent for Yolanda, how much still allocated from Yolanda in the present year's budget and from next year's budget. So we will have 3 for Yolanda. What was spent so far this year up to December and allocated for 2016 from government funds. And those coming from domestic and foreign donors, also I need those funds. And perhaps pledges, again, sounds good that we received this much, but those actualized. We need that information. If you don't have it now, that's fine. I'll need that to be able to, I will be asked that during the budget defense.
We have the information on
In your website.
On the website, but we can provide you with the hard
It's
copy.
in your website.
It's called Foreign Aid Transparency Hub.
That's only for the foreign donations.
That's correct, for foreign donors.
But the breakdown of the 88 billion you have allocated,
That's all national government money. It's a locally funded projects.
information.
We can
on
give that,
also.
we can give both, Madam
And
Chair.
in the 2016 budget, earmarked for Yolanda areas, if any. There still is, I'm sure.
There is.
Because we're not done with rehabilitation.
That's correct,
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Will by end of 2016, will we be complete with Yolanda rehabilitation?
That's correct. A total of a little over 185 billion pesos by 2016, Madam Chair. It was originally about 172, but subsequently there were additional rehab projects that were included. So it has gone up to about 185 billion pesos, Madam Chair. And 2016 will complete the funding.
Before I leave the issue of the NDREAM funds, the DILG, the DPWH had stated that it will build evacuation centers in areas which are visited often by natural hazards. The DILG already said, based on their BUB consultations, will also build evacuation centers. Again, we have 2 government agencies building evacuation centers. The NDREAM board, are they also utilizing funds for the building of evacuation centers?
Well, so far that they have not raised that point. It's just the DILG and the DPWH. But I think we told them to coordinate. It's possible that the prioritization of the areas that will where evacuation centers will be built will be agreed upon. But it's possible that the construction may be distributed to for the big ones especially. It will be DPWH. For some, it may be DILG. And it's even possible for certain places, the provinces, the provincial governments can undertake the construction.
But the NDREAM funds are not being used for this.
No.
They have earmarked in their respective agencies the funds for this construction.
Yes, Madam Chair.
And
but there's
now-
no fund that's allocated.
Under the NDREAM,
Under the
unless
NDREAM fund.
requested by the agency.
Well, for policy, we prefer that all these requirements either be provided for in the budget of the DPWH or the DILG, or even allocated through the LGUs, but not. We wanted the NDRIM fund for the most part, apart from the disaster prep, to be allocated for actual disaster rehab and reconstruction within a 2-year period from the time that the calamity occurred.
I leave the issue now of the NDRIM funds and proceed to the miscellaneous personnel benefit fund and the pension and gratuity fund. May I know what are the items of appropriations that are currently in the 2015 budget under these two funds, but were now transferred to the agencies? Were they actually transferred from these two funds? They're now transferred to the agencies?
For 2016, there are about four items that fall under the miscellaneous personal benefits fund. The first one involves the performance-based bonuses, which amounts to about 16.8 billion. The second is a cluster of funds of different agencies that are to meet the requirements for filling up of unfilled positions of different agencies. And that's about 16.95 billion pesos. The third item involves the funding for the requirements for the creation of new positions. So and that's about 7.7 billion. And then the fourth item is for the payment of other personal benefits. For example, the adjustment of compensation, which is really in preparation for the SSL4, for which about 50.6 billion pesos have been set aside.
This 50.6 billion set aside in the 2016 NEP is contingent on the proposed salary adjustment.
It would represent the first year of hopefully a 4-year SSL.
What happens if it is not approved?
Well, then this fund will not be utilized, but I'm sure everybody here is smiling and they want it. They all expect it to be approved.
This is across the board, all government agencies.
That's correct, including MUPs, the uniformed personnel. Yeah.
And Congress.
Well, not the Congress persons.
Secretariat.
Yes. The employees of Congress. Madam Chair, we at the start of the year, we commissioned
being discussed on the floor. That's why I'm wondering. It's allocated, but it's not being discussed, and I ask why.
There is a proposal for SSL4. It will need a separate law. It's not going to be the budget itself.
I understand. That's the reason why I'm asking it. There's a budgetary allocation in anticipation of the passage of the law.
That's correct.
But there is no bill being discussed on the floor. It is not on our agenda as an urgent legislative action. So I'm wondering why.
The reason for that is the proposed bill has just been submitted to the President for approval by the President and the Cabinet. And we're hoping that that is approved soon so that we can then pass it on to the Congress so that it will be
on October
enacted.
7. And then when we resume on November 3, that's budget already till December 18.
Yes.
So we can, how is it possible? You expect us to pass something that is not yet on the table.
We hope that it will be filed soon, and I think that's the intention.
I would
Because
like
we-
to be the principal author of that measure. Can you give me the draft measure, please, Secretary Abad, by this week?
Well, we have to take it up with the President first, and the Cabinet sometime. Well, we will have to ask the President.
We're
but-
adjourning next week on Wednesday. At the very least, it has to be filed before the adjournment of Congress so that hearings can be conducted even during the 1-month break, so that when we resume session on the 3rd of November, interpellations in both houses can be done, and we can approve it before November 15, before we finalize the budget. Right? Tama ang timeline ko? Ganun dapat. Shepherd. We cannot wait. If we file it and you give it to us after the break, it will just be read first reading in November, and it will be hostaged by the budget deliberations.
Well, we have already submitted the memorandum to the President, and it's in the office of the President.
All I'm saying is that to be realistic, and we don't want Congress to be blamed that we didn't pass a measure, can you kindly give it to us before the last day of session, which is 3 days to go?
It may not be possible, but if it's necessary, I think, Madam Chair, the President can certify it as an urgent measure so that we can go through the faster process of passing legislation.
We're saying if it's not possible to file it before adjournment on October 7, we will file it first week of November, and in between budget hearings, we will conduct and even have special sessions to pass it.
I hope that can be
Because
is possible.
it's such a waste. You have the budgetary allocation, and Congress is not moving because we don't have a draft measure as approved by Malacanang. But then again, why does it have to be approved by Malacanang first? Why don't you give me a draft of what you gave the President, and based on that draft, both houses can have one author each, then we just refine it based on what the President approves.
Well,
Because that's how bills go.
the joint resolution requires that the President approves the proposal that will be submitted.
But
to
what I'm
Congress.
saying is that it's just a draft first so that we can study it already, even before there's an endorsement of the President.
Well, we will ask the President if that's possible, because we also don't want to, while certainly there is a lot of expectations, we
We already raised expectations, so there's no way but to pass it. Otherwise, there will be a revolution before Christmas.
yes, that's correct. We realize that, and what we really want to do is to be able to do it in such a way that we can effect a substantial increase that's competitive with the markets, but at the same time making sure that it's still within the capacity of government to spend for.
When you say a substantial increase, but you've already allocated the amount, so it cannot go beyond the 50 billion.
Well, it's not going to be just 50 billion. That's the first year, hopefully, of the increase. But it is going to be a 4-tranche increase. So
The 50 billion is for 2016, which is the first tranche.
that's likely,
Correct.
yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, is that we cannot go beyond the ceiling of 50 billion we've set unless may pagkukunan tayo within the budget, assuming you still want to be more generous and give on the first year bigger than 50 billion.
Well, in our original initial estimation, I think that amount would suffice for the first year.
So, Secretary Butch, you are confident that even if it is not tackled in October, that in November you will be able to have the President approve it and the joint resolution can be approved? Sabay ko,
Yes,
isang araw, dalawang araw. Oo.
Yoni will make sure that it will pass, Chair. Well, I think it can be done, as what happened in the joint resolution that passed the SSL3. We'll make sure that it happens.
special purpose funds. In the 2016 NEP, it's it's almost 2 billion SPF, which is actually a 69% increase from appropriations in 2015. Enlighten me about the special purpose funds and the increase of that SPF from total 50.
Well, the special purpose funds, Madam Chair, were created to deal with very particular requirements of government. And as we earlier stated, for example, the need to anticipate the requirements for calamity response. So that's why we have the NDREAM fund. And the need to deal with contingencies like in case we need to respond.
Let me clarify. The NDREAM fund is distinct and separate from the special purpose fund.
It's one of those.
It's one of those.
Special purpose funds, Madam Chair.
Total, sir, 62.
What else are the other special purpose funds?
Well, you have, for example, the contingency fund. You also have the, as we earlier discussed, the allocation to local government units. Yes, if you go over the special purpose funds, these three actually are the what we call pure what we call lump sums, because they cannot be disaggregated. But the rest, for example,
Yes.
miscellaneous.
Just for the record, could you kindly tell us the lump sums which cannot, because of their nature, be
Be disaggregated.
Yes.
Well, the first one is calamity fund.
NDREAM. That's the NDREAM.
That's, yeah. And then the other one is contingency fund. For example, we use the money when, for example, there's war in Syria and we need to repatriate or move Filipinos there. These are the events that we cannot anticipate. And we use the contingency fund for those.
That money is lodged, it's still with DBM, it's not in DFA, no.
It's lodged in the Treasury.
In the Treasury.
In the Treasury.
The
And the
special-
President is authorized
To take on
effect releases from
that
those funds.
contingency
Yeah.
fund. Okay.
Now, in the case of the NDREAM fund, there is a process. In the case of the contingency fund, it's a request made to the Office of the President. The third one is the allocation to LGUs. Simply because, for example, as we earlier mentioned, it's not possible to allocate it to very specific LGUs until such time that we receive the certification from the BIR, which usually happens during budget execution time. Now, all the others, for example, miscellaneous personal benefits fund, for 2016, there's about 96.5 billion. There is, for every agency is required to submit, items that they will fill up, new positions that are created, so they have to submit that. So we have that list, and so therefore that is disaggregated. The same with pension and gratuity fund, because we ask them to send us a list of people who are going to retire either mandatorily or early retirement, and so there is a list of people there. We used to include the International Commitment Fund, which is really the fund for our commitments abroad to UN, for international conferences, but we have transferred that to the Department of Foreign Affairs. But even as it is transferred to the DFA, there is a list of those commitments in the ICF. And similarly with the e-government fund, which is now lodged under DOS. In the case of the e-government fund, this has been directly farmed out to the different agencies who require e-government support. Similarly, the other special purpose funds like ERA, there's a list of municipalities and barangays. Debt service payments, we also have a list of what we're going to pay for and to whom we're going to make those payments. The other one is MMDA. But this is the subsidy that it gets every year, and then budgetary support to GOCCs.
You mentioned the contingent fund, no? You said that would be, there are stipulations on the use of the fund.
Yes,
requirements,
there's a
yes.
guideline for
There's a
that, yeah.
guideline. I just wanted to know the justification for the increase in the allocation for next year, which is double of this year's 2 billion allocation.
Well, with all the events happening in the Middle East, in many parts of Europe, we've had to respond to more requests for repatriation, for assistance, medical, so we felt that to be able to meet those requirements, we needed to increase. That's apart from contingencies here. For example, when the Zamboanga City siege happened, we had to spend contingency fund to address that situation. Or sometimes we have conferences that are scheduled, which are not in the ICF list of conferences, or the president has to travel because of some important engagements. This is where you draw the contingency fund.
So all of those funds or that you mentioned make up what we call the SPF. And
Yes.
Clearly there are those you cannot disaggregate and those that are already disaggregated. And the implementation of all these funds is dependent on requests to the Office of the President.
Well, insofar as the NDREAM fund and the contingency fund.
Those two, but the
Yes.
others already lodged in the agencies.
Yes, they make a special budget request because it used to be the case that in the case of unfilled items before, when they were kept by the agencies, at the end of the year they wouldn't spend the money meant for items and declare them as savings. So we put them in this special purpose fund, and when they need it, then we release it.
Does this explanation answer the case filed before the Supreme Court?
Well, there were two petitions filed with the Supreme Court, and we responded to those questions here as well as in the House of Representatives. That there are effectively just three special purpose funds that you can categorize as lump sums. But all the others, they are in fact disaggregated, as we can show you, Madam Chair.
In my mind, it's clear. I want to understand more because it's really difficult to be able to contingent fund and the NDREAM fund. How are you able to project or do line item of the needs of those things? No, unless there are other funds being referred to in the petition apart from those you already mentioned.
Well, for example, they mentioned the CCT fund, which is 64 billion, and meant for allocated for 4.3 million households. There is in fact a list of 4.3 million households to which these tax subsidies are provided. But if we include the names of those families in the GAA, then you'll have a very thick GAA. So it's not practical. But certainly the DSWD can provide them with a list of those families who have been identified under the National Household Targeted Survey as CCT beneficiaries.
Yes, the 4 million families would be, there are warm bodies, in short. There are warm bodies that would comprise the 4 million
They have
families
names and addresses,
and
Madam
addresses.
Chair.
And it can be random audited anytime.
Yes, Madam Chair.
And I'm certain that the COA has done that and will do that.
Yes, because it's been going on since at least in this administration since 2010.
Could you kindly define savings? It's actually here. Where is it?
Well, savings
Sir Anan, sir.
is By the way, Madam Chair, the authority to define savings is lodged in the legislature as provided for in Article 6, Section 5, Paragraph 25 of the Constitution. That's why it's Congress exclusively has the right to define what savings is. And in Section 63, the meaning of savings is provided. Savings may be declared when there are balances of any program appropriations in this Act which have not been released or obligated resulting from. And then there are 5 sources of savings enumerated under that section, Madam Chair. So the discontinuance or abandonment of a PAP for profit not attributable to the agency, which will render it impossible to implement that program or project, or the non-commencement or the inability of an agency to obligate an allotment for justifiable causes, again, not attributable to the fault or negligence of the agency, which will also render it impossible to implement said programs or project. These were the 2 sources of controversies, that's why. But the rest were actually not included in the discussions of the Supreme Court because they are pretty much straightforward. For example, the adoption of efficiency measures like you use LED lights, or for example, the contract cost is lower than the approved budget for contract. And then finally,
The contract cost is lower than the approved budget because according to Secretary Singson, he'll have to ask permission to use the remaining budget for the continuation of the road. Let's say if there's a road for 100 million, they were able to bid it out for 85, the 15 million cannot be used for the continuation of that same road.
that has to be declared by the President as savings.
Yes,
And
so
then
he really
if-
has to go back to the President and ask.
Yeah,
And if
even if his proposal is to lengthen the same road for which he generated the savings for. Unless, of course, Madam Chair, there is a variation order that's requested by the department concerned to the extent of 10%. So it's possible for the agency to utilize that 10% directly without having to declare it as savings. But beyond 10%, then the agency will have to go to the President for the declaration of the rest of the funds as savings, and then for their use to augment a deficient existing item of appropriation.
with the definition of savings, there seems to be no incentive for the agency to implement better efficiency in the conduct of their work, because whatever savings from inefficiencies or lack of systems which accrues to savings is not usable unless it is declared as savings by the President and then for them to be allowed to use it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it is mandated by the Constitution, Madam Chair.
When you think about it, kung magtitipid ka para magamit mo, hindi ba ganun sa household? But in the way it's crafted here, even savings due to efficiency and systems, you should be rewarded, pero ipapaalam mo pa bago bumalik sa'yo.
Well, for some agents, or for most, I think, if it's savings generated in their MOEs, it actually can go back to them by way of collective negotiation agreement. They get the CNA benefit. Yeah.
It's PS and unfilled positions,
It is not possible, Madam Chair,
not
because
possible to...
to name that as a source of CNA benefits, because the practice in the past is, not to use the funds meant for either filling up positions or hiring new personnel for new or newly created positions, because of the thought that they can in fact be at the end of the year use as savings. So just to discourage that.
Is it that I understand it to mean in some agencies I have conducted hearings on that the unfilled positions can be declared as savings by mid-year, no? And they can use it elsewhere? No, that's not allowed.
No, it's possible. Not you don't have to wait for mid-year for example, for unfilled items or unfilled new positions. Because, for example, you're supposed to hire teachers in March. But, for example, by June, you have not hired a substantial number of teachers. Between March and June, that's savings that you can actually declare as such and use it to augment other items.
Okay, the questions will be never ending, but we have so much work to do. So thank you. I would just require or request for the submissions to assist me in plenary, and we will deem your budget approved, and see you in plenary.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the rest of the committee as well as the staff here.